Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. MC-Mura here, and in today's video we're gonna be talking about the beast himself, Mr. Daigo Omihara, because in a video by FGC translated, Daigo was talking about Street Fighter V, which characters he think are the very best. Spoiler alert, he said that he believes Cammy and Urien to be the two most powerful characters in the game, with Cammy specifically being the very best. And he also talked about a bunch of other characters being really good, like 10 characters or so. And later he also talked about which characters he think are really weak. He mentioned Alex, said that specifically Alex is very weak, the weakest in the game, and also a bunch of other characters. And during that video, Daigo also mentioned the Shotos, and he said that he believes the Shotos in general are really weak in this patch of Street Fighter V. And obviously when he's talking about the Shotos here, he's talking about Ryu, Ken, Akuma, Kage, and he did mention Sakura as well. So the 5 main Shotos for the most part. I know some people are saying that Sagat is bad, but in that same video Daigo was saying that Sagat actually have a lot of favorable matchups, and he doesn't think Sagat is that bad, or at least Sagat does well against a good enough number of characters to kinda escape the weak label by Daigo. And obviously Daigo is the GOAT, right? He is one of the most respected players of all time, so his opinion carries a lot of weight. And you have to think that Shotos are by far the most popular group of characters as well, right? Ryu, Ken, Akuma, Kage, I mean, we're talking about the most popular characters in the game. So this is an opinion that started a lot of talk, and you kinda have to think about, do the Shotos really suck? Now you have to think of this from the point of view of Daigo. A lot of the Japanese players are very hardcore and they are very dedicated to their characters, right? It was only recently, I would say, due to Street Fighter League, and especially when the Street Fighter League had the ban system, that the Japanese players were exploring with different characters. That was when Daigo was looking for secondaries, that was when Tokido was starting to use M-Bison here and there, or Balrog here and there. You know, back then he was still using Akuma, obviously, you know, messed around with Urien. So in general, the Japanese players are very loyal to their characters. And Daigo is saying that from his point of view, it's very hard to solo play a character like Ken or Kage or Ryu and win a CPT event for Japan, right? He is looking at it from that perspective. Now the main idea is that Shotos in general do have a lack of range with their normals for the most part, right? And I do say that for the most part that is correct. Most of the Shotos in Street Fighter V are quite stubby, especially if you compare them to the top tier characters like Urien or Cammy. I mean, that obviously is an accurate assessment, and I do think in a way Daigo is not wrong. It's very difficult to win a solo tournament with Shotos. I mean, obviously Japan itself is a very stacked region, but yeah, I do see his point, right? But you also have to consider that this might be a dated way of looking at a character trends. In that same video, Daigo was saying that Alex is worthless, right? That he will never lose to Alex. Although if you take a look at the English Street Fighter League or even the previous Red Bull Committee, right, you would see that Problem X actually did a lot of damage with Alex, right? He was beating Punk's Karen with Alex. So maybe you can't win a solo tournament from point A to point Z with Alex, but the characters certainly have a place. Most of the Western players, you will see them playing a bunch of different characters, because Street Fighter V in its current state, in my opinion, is a very matchup heavy game. You are doing yourself a disservice by just playing the one character and sticking to it. Can Daigo's Guile beat a really strong Balrog? I mean, obviously, with some grinding he can, but he will also have a much easier time if he, had a secondary that can deal with Balrog really well. So when you really think about it from that perspective, who in Street Fighter V as characters are strong enough to survive bad matchups and you won't need a secondary whiz. Honestly, I can only think of Urien, Cammy, and I do think Cammy is even questionable as that because she does have some annoying matchups, and maybe Rashid. But aside from that, all of the other characters you will need to swap, and that is when you would have to think about it, right? Like, even if my character is ultra good or like high tier, if the tournament characters or the characters that you will run into all the time are bad matchups, does that mean that my character is viable? I mean, that is something that you will have to consider. So I do think in general Shotos are fine in Street Fighter V, and I do think Ken specifically is actually very good. There are a lot of players who had a lot of success with Ken, and I do want to mention Ken specifically this season. And obviously in the previous seasons Akuma was always considered to be one of the very best. So yes, maybe in the patch that we're playing right now, the lack of normals can be hurtful, but at the same time you have to look at the bigger picture, right? I mean, yes, Ken for example might not have Karen's normals, but she also doesn't get Oki off of EXDB, while he does, right? She doesn't have a V-Trigger 2 that can, you know, convert into 500 damage on a whiff punish the way that Infectious did against Problem X. I mean, there is a lot to it than just this character got weak normals, therefore they are bad. I think that is a very shallow way of looking at it. Yes, Daigo obviously does have his opinion, he's talking about it from his own perspective, but even then, I do think from the point of view of a pro like him, you have to consider of the flexibility of the characters. And I do want to say something, and I hope this doesn't get taken the wrong way, right? But we have seen Daigo being incredibly wrong about stuff before, right? And obviously about others he was totally right, but he have been wrong before. And you have to remember that the Japanese players in general, a lot of them are very emotional, right? Like for example, for years now, Daigo never really thought about the Cody versus Guile matchup. He loses one set to John Takeuchi in Street Fighter League, and now Cody is a bad matchup. And it's like, didn't Cody exist for like 2 years prior to that? But they never really did their homework, and this is something that I did notice with Japanese players. So yes, they are amazing at the game, they are awesome, they are the best. I do love Japanese players in general and how they handle the game and their game knowledge, but also they don't know everything, right? You know, we have Laura. Laura is a living, breathing example of Japanese players underestimating characters, then getting beaten by them badly. So I don't have a doubt that if a player like Problem X started playing against Japanese players, maybe the Alex that Daigo is saying he would never lose to, I mean, you never know, right? Maybe Problem X can give him that beating. So it's an interesting topic in general, but I don't personally believe that Shotos are weak in general, or that they are that weak and uncompetitive, especially Ken and to an extent Akuma. And I do think Sakura is actually quite good, and maybe Sakura is not like a traditional Shoto, shouldn't really be bundled with them anyways. Ryu, I mean, yeah, he's alright. I wouldn't say he's bad or weak, but he's just okay. And Kage, I mean, yeah, I can see the struggle with Kage. Anyways, let me know your thoughts about the whole thing in the comment section below. I will be leaving a link to the Patreon page, the Discord server page, Twitter and Twitch pages in the description below. Thank you very much for watching and stay safe.